March 11th, 2026. For Japan, that day is supposed to be about quiet reflection, marking 15 years since the Great East Japan earthquake. But on this particular day of solemn memory, something shattered the silence. Something that sounds completely impossible.
It grew from the ground like a living thing. That's how an eyewitness in Osaka described it. Not an explosion, not some kind of collapse. Something just grew out of the asphalt in the middle of one of Japan's biggest cities. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But this was very, very real.
All right, so picture this. Umeda, Osaka. It's the bustling heart of Western Japan, people everywhere, cars, trains, total urban center. But on this morning, the daily commute came to a dead stop. Not because of traffic, but because a monster had woken up from right under the street.
I mean, the numbers here are just mind-boggling. A 100-ton steel and concrete sewer shaft, 3.5 meters wide, just bursts through the ground and rises over 10 meters into the air. That's taller than a 3-story building. So the question is, how on earth does something that heavy float? Well, the answer is actually a super simple physics principle you probably learned in school: buoyancy. It's the same force that makes a huge ship float. You see, the construction crew had pumped the water out from inside this hollow shaft, basically turning the 100-ton structure into a giant empty can. Surrounded by all that waterlogged soil, it was suddenly way less dense than the ground around it. Physics just took over from there.
And here's the crazy part. The secret was hiding in plain sight, right in the name of the place. Umeda literally means filled-in field. The entire district is built on what used to be a wetland, with ground that's totally saturated with water. So this wasn't just some freak accident. It was like a ghost of the land's past, pushing its way into our modern world. And it proves a really crucial point. Japan's neat and tidy surface is built on some very, very unstable foundations.
But on the very same day that this incredible physical pressure erupted in Osaka, a completely different kind of pressure was being released hundreds of miles away. This one didn't make a sound, but trust me, it tells us just as much about the forces that are bubbling right under the surface of modern Japan.
Okay, so our second story takes us over to Gunma Prefecture, where we meet a 63-year-old public servant who had his own personal eruption on that exact same day, March 11th.
So get this, after a whole lifetime of service, this re-employed worker decided to finally take his dream trip, a 109-day cruise around the world. But his bosses said no. Their reason? Public servant responsibility. You know, it's that unwritten rule in Japan. The group always comes before the individual. But this man, he decided nope, not this time. He went anyway. And his justification is what I find absolutely fascinating. He actually argued that he was fulfilling his duties. See, in his mind, he had served his time, he had done his part, and now his duty was to himself. This wasn't just some vacation. You gotta see it for what it was. It was a quiet rebellion, a one-man escape from a whole lifetime of conformity. So let's recap. We've got a 100-ton pipe bursting out of the ground and a 63-year-old man bursting out of his office. On the surface, they have absolutely nothing in common. But if you dig just a little deeper, you realize they're telling the exact same story. And here it is. This is the core of the whole thing. In Osaka, you had immense physical pressure from groundwater held down by asphalt and concrete that finally erupted. And in Gunma, you had immense psychological pressure from a rigid work culture held down by a sense of duty that also erupted. Two totally different forces, but exactly the same outcome, a sudden, shocking break from the surface. You see, both of these events are really just symptoms of the same condition. They show us a country where these huge, invisible pressures, both literal and metaphorical, are constantly pushing against a really rigid surface, just waiting for a crack to appear. Okay, but that brings us to the biggest question of all. Is it really just a coincidence that both of these eruptions happened on March 11th? Or was there something else in the air that day? A deeper pressure that the entire nation was feeling? Because March 11th, it's not just any old date on the calendar in Japan. Not by a long shot. It is a day of deep national trauma. The 15th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake, the tsunami, and the Fukushima nuclear disaster. A day of loss so profound it still haunts the nation. But here's the painful reality. After 15 years, things change. A poll found that 65% of people in the country feel like the memory of the disaster is fading away. It's like the nation is trying to move on, to pave over the past. But for so many people, the past isn't gone. It's just buried. Just think about this number. 2,519. That's how many people are still officially missing from the 3.11 disaster, 15 years later. For their families, there's no moving on. There's just waiting for a ghost to come home. And right on this anniversary, a story of incredible perseverance came out that just hits you right in the heart. Natsu Yumaine was only 6 years old when the tsunami took her away. For nearly 15 years, her family just waited. Then, thanks to this incredible new technology called Proteome Analysis, a tiny fragment of bone that was found was identified as hers. And when Natsu's remains were finally returned to her mother, she greeted her with these simple words, "Okaeri ganbatta ne," which means, "Welcome home, you did your best." It's like, after 15 years of all that silent, invisible pressure, a family's love finally broke through the surface and brought their daughter home. So what does this all mean? A floating pipe, a runaway employee, and a daughter's return, all on the very same day. These aren't just separate news stories. They're a snapshot of the pressures that are defining Japan's future.
And this is where you see this huge conflict at the heart of Japan today. On the anniversary, the Prime Minister promised a new disaster prevention agency to build trust. But at the exact same time, the government was pushing to restart the very nuclear power plants that caused the Fukushima meltdown. It's like they're trying to bury the risk while turning up the pressure underneath. So this leaves us with two really clear forces pushing up against modern Japan. On the physical side, you have aging infrastructure built on land that wants to reclaim itself. And on the social side, you have an old, rigid work culture that's clashing with a new generation's desire to just live for themselves. Ultimately, that one single bizarre day served as this incredibly powerful metaphor. It was a national wake-up call that the Japan the world sees, so orderly, so stable, so predictable, is built on foundations both of earth and of society that are anything but. That day proved that the neat surface of Japan is just that, a surface. Below it, there are powerful forces constantly moving in the ground, and maybe more importantly, in the hearts of its people. Which leaves us with one final kind of provocative question. Is that famous Japanese social harmony we always hear about, is it actually just a fragile lid placed on a boiling pot of pressure? And if what we saw on March 11th were just the first few cracks, what happens when the whole thing finally blows?